Hello, welcome to this video on oligopoly. So in this video we're going to look at the characteristics of an oligopolistic market and be able to illustrate the conditions of a firm in an oligopoly. It's worth just taking a second to practice saying that word so you don't embarrass yourself in public. This is not oligopoly, this is oligopoly. Oligopoly. So previously we've been looking at different market structures, perfect competition, all the way down to monopoly. Here we're looking at oligopoly. So towards the end of the spectrum that has lower levels of competition, and we're going to look at how we characterize firms that operate in this particular market, or this type of market. So in an oligopoly we have a few large firms that dominate the market. The firms here tend to be quite interdependent, so the actions of one firm impact on the others. As a result, we often don't see much competition in price. If one firm were to raise its prices, other companies would not follow because the goods are sort of similar. Customers will move to the lower cost option. If one firm was to lower prices, then other firms would have to follow suit, and we might get what's known as a price war. So there's no real gain in raising or lowering your price. Instead, oligopoly firms will tend to either work together through collusive practices, be these tacit or overt, which we'll come on to later, or sometimes engage in non-price competition. So here are our characteristics of firms operating in an oligopolistic market. We have a small number of large firms. There are significant barriers to entry. The products are similar but differentiated. We have imperfect knowledge between buyers and sellers, and this is really the key one over here, the level of interdependence. Firms are very interdependent. One firm's actions can have a large effect on other firms. So how do firms react? Well, normally they either collude or they engage in non-price competition. So here are some examples we might describe as being oligopolistic industries. In the bottom left-hand corner, we have famous Pepsi and Coke. If we think about smartphones, we might think about Apple, Samsung, Nokia. The banking sector, a few large firms dominate the markets, maybe 5 or 6 high street banks. Airlines, again, we have large companies, not too many of them compared to monopolistic competition. Maybe in terms of Google, Microsoft, or Apple in terms of operating systems, we have again a limited choice here of Android, iOS, or maybe Windows. So how do we illustrate firms that operate in an oligopoly market? Well, in terms of making normal profit, again we have the same cost base, and products are differentiated here. We have downward sloping demand curve. There is some ability to charge higher prices. So this business here would be making normal profits at a price of P1 at an output of Q1. Firms in oligopoly, we can also illustrate them making supernormal profits and losses as well in the normal way. So how do we measure whether a market is actually an oligopoly? What we tend to do is we tend to look at the firms, and we tend to look at the level of market share that they have. And we tend to look at how much of the market the largest firms in the market control. And we do this by calculating what's known as concentration ratio. So CR here in the diagram on the left stands for concentration ratio. So what is a concentration ratio and how do we calculate it? Well, this is normally calculated using market share data. So on the right hand side here we have a number of different drinks companies. We have their sales figures, and then the market share is the percentage of sales for that company as a percentage of the whole market. So here 460 out of 2,000, all the sales, 23% market share. We then calculate the concentration ratio, and we normally express this as the 3 firm or 5 firm, a certain number of businesses, X firm concentration ratio, where X represents the number of largest firms that we're taking into consideration. So we always organize them with the largest one at the top and then working down to the smallest market share. So for example here, if we wanted to look at the 3 firm concentration ratio, what we would do is list them by concentration, by market share, and here we would take the top 3, so 23%, 17.5%, 11.25, add them together. The 3 firm concentration ratio in this market would be 51.75%. If we wanted to look at the 4th firm concentration ratio, we're just adding on that 4th firm to our total. So if we add on 9.5, the 4 firm concentration ratio is 61.25%. A standard approach would be to look at the 4 firm concentration ratio, the 4 largest firms in the market, and in an oligopoly we might expect the value to be greater than 40%. Here is the market for petrol retailers in the UK, and if we were to take the 4 firm or to look at the 5 firm concentration ratio, we would probably conclude here that these biggest 5 firms, in terms of their market share, this would be an oligopoly. 5 large firms here dominate the market. Second thing we said was there are significant barriers to entry, and there are a number of reasons why we might get barriers to entry in an oligopoly. So we're going to look through these in turn. The first one is economies of scale. And economies of scale is where average cost falls as output increases. Now larger firms, and in an oligopoly we have large firms, can enjoy much lower costs and thus offer a price that is smaller than new entrants, and so they can't match it. So here we have a large firm, firm A, who is able to exploit significant economies of scale with their size. Firm B is a smaller firm, a new entrant, and can only exploit a small amount of economies of scale before they start to get diseconomies of scale. So firm A has a clear advantage here. If they were to charge a price somewhere in the middle here, then firm A can make a profit, whereas firm B cannot enter that market, cannot compete economically. So that can present a barrier to entry and reduce the level of competition, the size of the business and the ability to exploit economies of scale. Another way in which firms in an oligopoly can prevent entrance to create a barrier is to do with this. It's called limit pricing. So if we imagine a scenario on the left hand side, we have the long run average cost curve for firms in this industry. Now if the price here is at the green dot, let me sort that line out for you, how embarrassing. If the price here is at the level of this green dot, P1, well, the new entrant can make some profit here, so can survive. The existing firm can also make some profit here, so they can survive. So here the new entrant, is feasible for them to enter this market. But what the firm might do, the existing firm, is it's actually limit their prices. They might decide to limit their price to a lower level, P2 here on the right hand side, so that they actually make a smaller level of profit. Now they're still making a small level of profit, smaller than they did previously, but what's happened to the new entrant in the market? The new entrant in the market now is making a loss. The average cost is higher than the price, so they're going to be losing money and they won't be able to sustain their presence in the market. So firms can create a barrier to new entrants by adopting a policy of limit pricing. This is where products are sold by a supplier at a price low enough to make it unprofitable for other players to enter the market. Related to this is the idea of predatory pricing. It's really a more extreme version of limit pricing. This is where a dominant firm incurs not just small profits but actual losses with the intention of removing a rival firm or new entrant. So this would be the situation here where at a price of P1 or PP, sorry, this price here, the firm is actually making a loss. The current price is way lower than the cost of production, so this firm is making a loss. What is the theory? Well, if they price so low at P, any new entrant is also going to lose money. And if they're a new entrant, eventually they will leave. So if you have a look here in terms of the pricing strategy we might lose, we might have a high price, then the new competitor enters the market, we cut our price and we make a loss. Now, the new competitor will be making a loss, making a loss, making a loss. Eventually, the new competitor might leave the industry, and then we put our prices back up to what they were previously to increase our profits again. Now, this predatory pricing is actually illegal if proven in the EU and in the UK. But the key is there that it has to be proven. It's anti-competitive. Branding is another way to create a barrier to entry. So creating a unique name or image for a product in the consumer's mind makes customers more loyal. So even if a new firm was to enter the market, even if they have similar products, they're unlikely to succeed because they don't have that brand. So that acts as a barrier to entry. If you look at the businesses here on this shot, it'd be very difficult for a rival to compete with these brands, and they're all large-scale businesses in oligopoly. A patent is another barrier to entry. So a patent is a document from a government, a license that gives the holder, the creator of that particular invention, the right to use that invention exclusively for a period of time. This can prevent competitors entering the market. If you have the patent to a new technology, no one can copy your idea, there can't be any competition. Sunk costs is another potential barrier to entry. So these are costs that have already been incurred and cannot be recovered. So if there are significant sunk costs, this will deter competition in two ways. Firstly, how do we get the money in order to pay for these sunk costs in the first place? If that's difficult, I can't enter the market. And secondly, it makes entering the market more risky, as if I was to decide to leave, to exit, I can't get this money back. So the idea here, the moral or the motto in the bottom right hand corner, when what is done cannot be undone. If I've spent these costs, this money, I cannot recover it. So it's quite risky to enter this market, so I'm not going to. It's a barrier to entry and exit. We said that oligopolistic markets, as another characteristic, so moving beyond barriers to entry now, is their interdependence. So firms tend to be quite interdependent. The actions of one firm affect the actions of another. If one business makes an attempt to cut price, if one supermarket cuts their price to try and gain market share, it's likely other firms are going to follow suit. And so this can sometimes lead to a price war where firms compete with each other to offer discounts. Lower and lower and lower. If you offer 75 cents, I'll offer 50 cents. If you offer 50 cents, I'll offer 25 cents, to a point where actually no one benefits. We all just end up charging low prices as businesses. So in this video, we've looked at the characteristics of an oligopolistic market and looked at the conditions of a firm operating in an oligopoly. That's it. Thanks very much for listening.